It's astonishing what some people will endure for just a bit of money. I guess that's what desperation does. And now, I'm one of those desperate people. My drive to get my daughter the life-saving medical treatment she needs brought me to where I am now. That same desperation has now left me terrified every day, wondering what's going to happen next to Danny and me, now that everything's finished. I had no other option. I needed the money immediately. I couldn't qualify for a loan, and the insurance company flat out refused to cover the treatment under our policy. My job barely paid above minimum wage, and I still needed close to $5,000. The only way I could make this work was to pick up a second job, working graveyard shifts somewhere else. At least until I saved enough for her treatment. Danny was all I had left after losing her mother in that car accident last year. I couldn't lose her too. I searched everywhere. I combed through classifieds and drove all over town, frantically searching for a job that paid enough and had available night shifts. It seemed hopeless, but I had no choice. I had to find something soon. Our town was small, and job prospects were slim. Then, in what felt like a lucky break at the time, I found a small grocery store about a mile from our home. It was called Schur's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. It was a strange little store that was closed during the day and only opened around 8 p.m., shutting down sometime before dawn. The odd hours seemed suspicious, and I couldn't imagine who would shop there when 24-hour chain stores were around. But I didn't care. It was a job, and the unusual schedule would fit perfectly with my needs. So I decided to apply. After finishing my shift at my day job, I was on my way home. My friend Kathy had been kind enough to watch Danny while I worked and even agreed to help out if I found a night shift elsewhere, at least for a month or two. With that reassurance, I decided to stop by the strange store that only seemed to open at night. I hesitated at first, worrying that there might be something shady about a place only operating in the dark. But despite my doubts, I knew it was my best chance, given my lack of qualifications and the need for a graveyard shift. I parked and walked to the entrance. The store looked a bit run down, but still had signage and sales advertisements posted out front. It had the appearance of a normal grocery store, which eased my nerves, and I decided to follow through with my plan. As I approached, I noticed something odd under the store's name, Schur's. There was a symbol, which looked like Japanese kanji or something similar. C. Stepping inside, I was surprised to find the place much larger than it had seemed from outside. There were aisles filled with groceries, household supplies, and even racks of clothes. I had no idea how such a large operation could exist in a place like this. Most of the shoppers seemed typical enough, though there were a few who clearly preferred shopping at night. One person gave me a deathly glare when I accidentally let my gaze linger too long on them, and I quickly looked away. The staff didn't seem out of the ordinary either, a diverse group like any other grocery store. No one seemed too cheerful or particularly downcast. What did catch my attention was the silence around the checkout area. There wasn't much talking. Determined, I walked toward the front, looking for a manager's office to inquire about a job. I was hopeful when I spotted a sign that read, "Help Wanted." But my optimism wavered when I read the full sign. Help wanted, but not always needed. I wasn't sure what to make of that, so I decided to find someone to ask. As I approached the office and raised my hand to knock, I was stopped by a large man in a blue apron. His name tag read, Store Manager, Benny. He greeted me with a friendly yet strained, "Hello, can I help you find something today?" His smile looked like it might break his face if he kept it up for another second, like it was barely holding together. Ignoring my unease, I remembered why I was there. "Yes, actually, I was hoping to apply for a job," I said, gesturing toward the Help Wanted sign by the door. Benny's smile dropped, and he glanced at the sign. He looked like he was about to say something when he raised a finger and pulled a radio from his pocket. "Molly, what's the situation with the baggers today? How are we holding up on staff?" Benny asked into the radio, drumming his fingers on his tie while he waited for a response. No reply came immediately. He flashed that unsettling smile again, his face tightening as the silence stretched on. Eventually he spoke again. "Sorry, but I think we're full at the moment." "Thanks for your interest, though." He was about to send me on my way when the radio crackled to life. I couldn't make out much, but what I did hear sounded odd. Something along the lines of, "Rob. Caught. Problem." got bagged. I didn't know what to think of those fragmented words. Before I had time to process it, Benny muttered under his breath, "All right, but answer faster. Next time. Could have been a code black, and if you mess with those customers, it's your ass on the line." I stood there in an awkward silence as Benny spun around, his frustration instantly masked by that same forced smile. "Congratulations," he announced loudly, his tone suddenly enthusiastic. "We've got an opening now. Let's get you set up. Can you start tonight?" "Tonight?" I echoed, surprised that they would want me to start right away without even an interview or application process. "Yes, right now," he confirmed. "Don't worry. We'll sort out all the paperwork later. We're actually a bit busier than usual tonight and could really use the help. But first, let's go over the terms and get some of the mandatory paperwork sorted." Thinking he was referring to a salary negotiation, I asked, "Sure, what's the pay and benefits?" I knew it wasn't the smoothest move to ask right off the bat, but I needed that money badly, and I couldn't afford to get lowballed. Danny's treatment depended on this. $45 an hour for baggers, which is where we start everyone, he said, casually dropping a number that nearly made me gasp. 45 an hour for a grocery bagger? My shock must have shown because Benny quickly raised his hand, cutting off my next question. "We value hard work, integrity, and just a little bit of discretion," he added, letting out a hearty laugh while slapping his knee. "In all seriousness, though, there's a non-disclosure agreement you'll need to sign with the paperwork." Despite how strange it all seemed, the hefty pay, the NDA, and his constant grinning, $45 an hour was almost double what I made at my day job. The promise of that kind of money overpowered the uneasy feeling building up in my gut. With just a month of working here along with my day job, I'd have enough for Danny's treatment. It felt like a miracle. He continued, "We've got full health and dental coverage, but no life insurance. For some reason, those policies always seem to run into issues." His grin stretched wider at that, and it looked even more unnatural. But I barely registered the strangeness of his words. All I could hear was the cha-ching of my future paycheck. This was my chance to save Danny, and I wasn't going to hesitate. "I'll take it," I said without thinking twice. "Smart decision," Benny said, clapping his hands together. "Welcome to the She family. Ed, get out here and get our new hire an apron and a name tag. Start him off with the basic bagger training." An older man shuffled out from the back room, looking unpleasant and walking with a strange, stiff gait. He didn't bother introducing himself, and when I offered a smile and introduced myself, he only gave me a once-over and snorted in disgust. Trying not to take it personally, I waited for him to speak, but the silence dragged on until I was just about to ask about the training. Before I could get a word out, he cut me off with a gruff question. "You know baggin', feller?" "Bagging? Like groceries?" I asked, trying to clarify. He glared at me, nodded, and let out a humorless laugh that ended in a rough, coughing fit. When he finally stopped, he said, "Not like this, you don't. All right, come on. I'll show you how we do the baggin' and go over the other rules. Better listen close because I don't repeat myself." I nodded, trying to suppress the growing discomfort, and followed him toward the back. But just as we were about to reach the back room, his radio crackled. A nervous voice on the other end said, "Code black, repeat, code black." Ed's face twisted in annoyance, somehow managing to look even more irritated than before. "God damn it, not more of them," he muttered under his breath before storming off, angrily barking something unintelligible into the radio as he left me standing there, completely dumbfounded. I stood there unsure of what to do next. What was a code black? And why did it seem like everyone was on edge about it? Just as I was about to go search for someone, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Startled, I turned to see a woman with a tag on her shirt that read, "Assistant Manager, Molly." Her smile felt more genuine than what I had seen from most of the others here. "Sorry we haven't met yet. You must be the new hire. I'm Molly, the AM here. I'll be helping with your training and orientation. You'll be a great asset to us at She's." She gestured toward the backroom doors, guiding me through. As we walked, I noticed several doors resembling industrial ice boxes, which made me wonder how much they must store to need that many freezers. Scattered throughout the space were shelves stacked with boxes and pallets of strange items. chemicals, metalworking gear, hardware, and even crates with gun manufacturers' logos. Once again, I questioned what kind of store this actually was. The odd inventory added to the messy, chaotic feel of the place, and I was thankful I wouldn't be the one tasked with organizing it. We finally reached an office room. The walls were painted a blinding, childlike blue, almost like something out of a kindergarten classroom. The color triggered a pang of nostalgia, reminding me of when Danny was in kindergarten. Steeling myself, I reminded myself why I was doing this. I had to get through it for her. The office was sparsely furnished with just a desk, a few chairs, and a file cabinet. On the blue walls, black characters were painted in what appeared to be some form of calligraphy, more of those kanji symbols I'd seen before. I briefly wondered what they meant, but before I could dwell on it, Molly motioned for me to sit. She pointed to one of the two chairs in the room, the one facing the desk, and I took a seat. Molly sat across from me, flipping through a few papers on a clipboard before turning around to rummage through the file cabinet. As I sat waiting, a sudden shriek pierced the silence from somewhere outside the office. I snapped my head toward the door, heart pounding, but Molly didn't seem to react. She kept sifting through the cabinet, unfazed. I was about to ask her if she'd heard it when she spun back around, a large binder in hand, and dropped it onto the desk with a loud thud. "Before we begin your training, please fill out this form. It's for your safety, and ours," she said, handing me a piece of paper. It was the non-disclosure agreement Benny had mentioned earlier. It felt odd that they required an NDA before anything else. No tax forms, payroll details, or healthcare paperwork. I briefly wondered if they were paying people under the table, which would actually help me save faster for Danny's treatment. Without thinking too much about it, I signed quickly, barely registering what I was agreeing to keep secret, or what the consequences would be if I didn't. Molly took the paper, glanced over it, and smiled. "Good. That's all set. Let's get started. This," she said, slapping her hand on the large binder, "is the employee handbook. We only have one copy, so you'll be doing some reading. But since we're short on time and need manpower, I'll give you a quick rundown." She grimaced slightly as she mentioned how pressed they were for help, glancing at her watch before fiddling with her walkie-talkie. She resumed, "As a bagger, you're essential in ensuring customers leave satisfied. You're one of the last people they interact with, except in certain circumstances." She cleared her throat, just as a muffled noise sounded from somewhere deeper in the back room, though I couldn't tell what it was. "Now, the basic rules and code of conduct," she said, turning serious. "First, you are to bag products according to the customer's preference. Always ask them what type of bags they want. Their word is final on how things should be bagged. Second, under no circumstances are you to ask about or discuss the customer's purchases, no matter how curious you may be or how chatty they seem. No questions. Got it?" She slammed her fist down on the binder, making me jump. Yes, I understand," I stammered, feeling my heart race a little. "Good," she said, continuing. "Third rule. You are not to assist customers in loading or unloading items from their vehicles. If anyone asks you to help them to their car, do not, under any circumstances, leave the building with them, no matter what story they tell you. This is company policy and the customers know it. If anyone persists or makes you uncomfortable, press the yellow button at the end of the checkout line near the bagging station. A security officer will escort the customer to aisle 4 for processing and detainment." I blinked, confused. Detainment? They didn't just escort them out? Before I could ask about it, Molly moved on to the next rule, as if processing and detainment was the most normal thing in the world. "The most important rule," Molly said, her voice dropping a notch, "is regarding a special bag request. You'll know it when you hear it. When a customer requests it, you are to press the black button at the end of the checkout and follow the code black protocol. These guests are typically our highest paying customers, often here under Mr. Xi's personal invitation. They must be attended to as quickly and discreetly as possible." There it was again. Code black. What was this special bag she was talking about? I could feel concern creeping onto my face, but Molly ignored it as she continued. "Cell phones, smartwatches, or any kind of recording devices are strictly prohibited while you're on duty. This is for both the customers, privacy, and our own. She went on. The store closes at exactly 4 a.m. Any customers remaining after that will be escorted out, except, of course, for those involved in a code black. No one is allowed in the basement or the inventory backrooms except for managers and stock employees. Simple enough, right? Any questions? She asked, flashing me yet another one of her unnerving smiles. Well, I had a couple of questions about I began, but she cut me off mid-sentence, her voice louder as she spoke over me. Great. I knew you were a fast learner. Come on, let's get you to the check stands. Without waiting for my response, she grabbed my shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm, and practically dragged me out of the office. I felt a few customers glance my way as I was ushered along, some even smirking at the sight, which only added to my embarrassment. She stopped in front of a checkout station, the number 3 flickering overhead. The other 2 checkout lines were busy with customers, the cashiers and baggers working a few feet away from where I would be stationed. Molly cleared her throat, catching the attention of the young man working there. He had dirty blonde hair and a bored, unimpressed expression on his face. Hey Lee, this is our new bagger. Show him the ropes and go easy on him, okay? It's his first day. We don't need another Rob situation this soon, all right? Have fun, you two. With that, she left, heading back toward the mysterious back room. Lee barely glanced at me before muttering, "Save it." I don't get attached to the newbies, just in case. I blinked, taken aback by the abrupt coldness. I liked Rob, he continued, his voice lower now. He was my friend, and now, well, it's best not to talk about what happened to him. Just follow the rules, do your job, and you should be fine. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, but he seemed less hostile than Ed, so I gave him a mock salute and moved to the bagging station, trying to keep things light despite the gnawing discomfort in my gut. It was going to be a long night. The first customer came through. Lee worked in silence, scanning their items, while I grabbed a few bags. Before I could even start bagging, Lee kicked me sharply in the leg, making me flinch. His eyes narrowed at me as if I had just committed a serious offense. What? I thought I was supposed to... Then I realized my mistake. The customer was frowning at me, waiting. I had forgotten to ask. Oh, right. What kind of bag would you like? I asked, forcing a smile. Paper, the older woman sneered, barely looking at me. I quickly bagged her items. Groceries, mostly produce, meat, and dairy. But there were some strange items mixed in, like a set of kitchen knives and boxes of what looked like ammunition. I nearly asked about it, but caught myself just in time, remembering the rule. No questions. The night dragged on, with customer after customer, each one stranger than the last. One bought zip ties, large amounts of medical-grade sedatives, and an absurd number of candy bags. Another bought massive amounts of ammunition, along with watermelons and a Kevlar vest, all while stocking up on alcohol. The unsettling combinations of items made me more uneasy with each passing transaction, but I kept my mouth shut, following the rules. Finally, after a string of disturbing customers, I found a bit of relief. An elderly woman named Marge came through, smiling warmly at me. She was friendly, chatting away as she bought baking supplies, flour, eggs, butter, spices. It was a welcome reprieve from the others, and I enjoyed the small talk. "You must try my raspberry tart," she said, beaming. "It's divine. I'll bring some by next time, or better yet, I think I still have some in my car. Would you be a dear and help an old woman with her groceries?" I was about to say yes, charmed by her sweetness, when I caught sight of Lee. His face had gone pale, and he shook his head subtly but firmly. I hesitated, then glanced back at Marge, only to notice the second half of her groceries. Nestled among the baking supplies were containers of rat poison, bleach, and ammonia. She was still smiling, but something about it now seemed off. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to muster up a response, but my throat felt tight. Marge, still smiling that unsettling grin, asked again, her voice smooth but with a hint of insistence. "Come on, dearie. My hip's not what it used to be after that nasty fall. It'll just take a minute, and you can enjoy a treat and a nice little tip as well." Her smile shifted in a way that made my skin crawl. Finally, I managed to blurt out, "No thank you, ma'am. It's store policy." We aren't allowed to escort customers outside under any conditions. Her grin dropped immediately, replaced by a brief flash of anger. Oh well, your loss, I suppose. I would have made it spectacular. I thought I could get one of the new ones before you caught on. Next time, Sonny, I might just find out where you live and make a house call. She winked, pushing her cart away, leaving me shocked and horrified by the implications of her words. Lee elbowed me in the ribs, jolting me back to the present. He gestured to the next customer, forcing me to shove the disturbing encounter with Marge to the back of my mind and continue the rest of the shift. After bagging a grotesque variety of items for the store's unnervingly strange customers, I knew the shift was finally over when the crackling PA system blared. It is now 4 a.m., and we are closing. If you have not purchased your items, you must leave. If you are loading goods, remember that no employees are permitted to leave with you. Any customers lingering in-store will have their items, and themselves, confiscated. I couldn't help but think about how seriously they enforced that 4 a.m. closing. As I watched the store's security team, a group I hadn't seen before, sweep the aisles, I realized just how intense the situation was. These weren't your run-of-the-mill security guards. They were more like a paramilitary unit, equipped with flashlights and batons, ensuring that no one overstayed their welcome. The mention of customers being confiscated made me uneasy, especially with how rigidly they cleared the store. I too was ushered out with the rest of the staff, who left without a word. I tried to make a joke to Lee, asking if they ever gave overtime, but he just kept his head down, ignoring me completely. The more I learned about this place, the more I regretted taking the job. But I was stuck. I needed to save enough for Danny's treatment, so I had to endure a little longer. For the next few weeks, I kept my head down and pushed through, bagging unsettling items for bizarre and sometimes downright dangerous-seeming customers. I overheard 2 code blacks. During that time, though I never saw what happened, Lee had warned me not to look and to avoid any interaction with those customers altogether. After the first code black in my second week, Jay, another bagger, vanished. When I asked about him, Lee warned me to drop the subject, fueling my growing fear of what could happen if I was caught in a code black myself. The only good news was the money. To my surprise, my paycheck had almost no taxes deducted, and I'd managed to save nearly $2,800 from just 2 weeks of work. A few more weeks, combined with what I had from my other job, and I'd have enough to pay for Danny's treatment. All I had to do was survive 2 more weeks, and I could quit for good, leaving She's and all its horrors behind. The 3rd week passed without incident, but it was the 4th week, my last, that changed everything. That's when I had a disastrous run-in with a customer that set off a chain of events I never could have anticipated, events that still haunt me and threaten my family to this day. It was around 11 p.m., and things were going as smoothly as they could in that strange place. There was an unusual air of tension among the staff, though, and Lee mentioned that Mr. She, the store's elusive owner, would be stopping by that night. I was trying to ask him more about the mysterious Mr. She when a large, bald man approached our checkout. He wore horn-rimmed glasses and had a jowly face, his leering stare making me instantly uncomfortable. He tried to strike up a conversation with me, but every instinct I had screamed to ignore him. "Ah, come on, lighten up. You're new here, right? What's it like working at She's? Seen any real action?" I brushed off his question with the standard response. "What type of bag would you like, sir?" He grinned wickedly, his glasses slipping slightly as he laughed. "I'll show you my bag if you show me yours." His belly laugh echoed, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. After what felt like an eternity, he finally composed himself and said, "Plastic's fine, I suppose. Just trying to lighten the mood. You look tense, like you could use a break." I kept my focus on bagging his items, an obscene amount of junk food, a pair of pliers, lube, condoms, and various chemicals like bleach and OxyClean. I had gotten somewhat used to the disturbing purchases, but there was something about this man that was particularly loathsome. "Yeah, you definitely need a break," the man insisted, leaning in with an oily grin. "I've got something to perk you up in my car. I'm right outside. Help me take this stuff out, and I'll make it worth your while." His tone dripped with something far darker than casual conversation. I couldn't respond, my skin crawling at the thought of being anywhere near this man outside the store. Desperate to defuse the situation, I fell back on the store's rules. "We're not allowed to leave the store with customers for any reason," I said firmly. To my horror, he didn't back off. "Oh, come on. You're just playing hard to get. I'll pay you more than whatever these clowns are giving you. Let's go outside, and we can talk about it." His persistence sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I repeated the rule, my hands fumbling as I bagged the last of his items. But he wasn't finished. "Hey, listen to me, you little fuck! You think you're too good for me? You think you're hot shit?" His face turned a deep shade of red, spittle flying from his mouth as he spat his words. "You're coming outside now. No one ignores me like this. I've got a special treat for stubborn punks who don't listen." His hands clenched into fists, and he stepped closer. Panic gripped me, but then I remembered the yellow button by the bagging station. I pressed it discreetly while trying to stand my ground, shrinking back as he loomed over me, looking like he was ready to grab me. Before he could act, a large gloved hand fell on his shoulder. I looked up, startled to see a nearly 7-foot-tall man clad in riot gear, a strange combination of military and police armor. The security guard had appeared out of nowhere, and his presence was unnerving, even for me. The customer turned to yell at him, "Do you pricks know who the fuck I am? I know the owner. You'll all be sorry you crossed me, I swear I'll—" His rant was cut short by a sickening crunch, followed by his body going limp. The guard had struck him with a bloodied baton, and the customer crumpled to the floor, dazed but still conscious. His eyes glazed over. The guard crouched down and seized him by the throat, lifting him effortlessly back to his feet. The customer, barely able to speak, whimpered, "Wait! Wait!" But the guard punched him hard in the chest, a sickening sound like ribs breaking reverberating through the air. The helmeted figure turned to me, his voice calm but cold. What kind of bag was he using? I was stunned, unsure what the bag had to do with anything, but I managed to answer, "Plastic. He was using plastic bags." The guard chuckled darkly. Too bad he didn't pick paper. He reached down, dumping out the contents of one of the plastic bags, then slipped it over the customer's head. I stood frozen, horrified, as the guard tightened the bag, easily choking the life out of him in front of me. In a matter of moments, it was over. The customer lay motionless on the floor. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. 2 more guards appeared, one of them dragging a stretcher, and they swiftly carried the body toward the back room. As if on cue, Benny, the store manager, appeared beside us, his fake smile plastered across his face. "I'm sorry you had to see that, but I'm glad you're safe. We take threats very seriously here, and we prioritize the safety of our employees. You can rest easy knowing we keep this place protected from dangerous people like him." His tone shifted slightly as he added, "I trust what happened will stay between us, right? After all, we wouldn't want you endangered by anyone like that, knowing where you live, would we?" His smile widened, the threat thinly veiled beneath his words. Then, as casually as he'd arrived, he disappeared into the back room. I understood perfectly. There was no going to the authorities about what I'd just witnessed. Any thoughts of reporting this place or escaping the nightmare faded in the shadow of the danger Benny had just hinted at. I had no choice but to stay quiet. Despite the horrific encounter, the night wasn't over. I still had to finish my shift, and Lee refused to speak about what we had both just witnessed. We moved through the motions, pretending everything was fine as the clock inched closer to 4 a.m. I was so close to being done with this place. Just a few more days, and I'd be able to quit and get out of here for good. Danny's treatment was within reach. Then, something unusual happened. A well-dressed man walked up to checkout number 2, and suddenly the cashier switched off their light, claiming the scanner had stopped working. It seemed suspicious. The scanner had been fine all night. The other staff exchanged nervous glances, and I realized something was wrong. The man had to be one of those special customers. My heart sank. I glanced at Lee, and he was visibly sweating, fumbling with the cash register as the man casually strolled over to our checkout. His basket seemed innocent at first. Spools of fine sewing thread, thimbles, and other tailoring supplies. But as I took a closer look, I noticed the hacksaw, plaster cast, and several boxes of nails and rivets mixed in. My mind couldn't reconcile the odd combination, but I tried to relax, telling myself it wasn't any stranger than the other purchases I'd seen that night. Yet, the air felt heavy, and I had the sinking feeling this was going to be much worse than I imagined. Lee was pale, scanning the small items wordlessly as they moved down the conveyor belt. The man, wearing a wide, unsettling grin, turned to me, tipping his hat. "Good evening, my friend," he said, smoothly. "My name is Henry Jaspin. I work for a little antique clothing shop, and I'm here to pick up some materials." I felt a small wave of relief. This didn't seem too strange. I gathered my composure and asked, "What type of bags would you like today, Mr. Jaspin?" He smiled wider, as if pleased by the question. "Well, my good fellow, paper for these small items will do just fine. I've found everything I need for my tailoring work. Fine thread, thimbles, the basics." He paused, eyeing me carefully. "But what I really need tonight, my boy, is some raw material. So the bag I'd prefer is a body bag, preferably the larger variety." My mind went blank. Did I hear that right? A body bag? Panic shot through me as my heart raced, but the words in the employee manual echoed in my mind. "A special bag request. You'll know it when you hear it." This was it. My first was code black. I forced my trembling hand to reach under the bagging station and press the black button. An alert immediately echoed over nearby walkie-talkies. "Code black on checkout 3, came the confirmation, and I heard movement from the back. I handed Mr. Jaspin his small paper bag as Benny appeared, moving toward us with an air of forced calm. "Good evening, Mr. Jaspin," Benny greeted him, but I could hear the uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. "Oh, Benny," Mr. Jaspin laughed. "Don't worry. I know what I asked for, but I wouldn't dream of picking you, old friend. We go back too far for that, and besides, your skin is terrible. Can you imagine one of our suits on you?" He let out a howl of laughter, and Benny joined in, though his chuckle was strained. Mr. Jaspin's eyes settled on me, looking me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. "Your new hire, however. Now he has a nice strong jaw, broad shoulders, not too much meat on him, but he'll do." He scrutinized me like I was a piece of livestock. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to comprehend what he was implying. Benny quickly interjected. "Of course, you're free to pick as you please, Mr. Jaspin. But if I might suggest, we just processed an unruly fellow earlier tonight. He's on the larger side. He might suit your needs." Mr. Jaspin considered this, nodding thoughtfully. "Lead the way, Benny. Let's have a look." I followed them, sandwiched between Benny and Mr. Jaspin as we headed toward the back of the store. Benny shot me an apologetic glance as we approached a keycard locked door. He swiped us through, and we descended into the basement. The air grew colder, and my gut churned with a sense of foreboding. When the lights flickered on, I had to stifle a gasp. The basement was filled with rows upon rows of body bags. Most were full, and through the partially unzipped openings, I could see corpses, some fresh, others in various stages of decomposition. The smell of death lingered in the air, thick and nauseating. It looked like a morgue. No, something worse. My mind raced with horror as I realized what was happening. These bodies were the products. They were the options in the unholy trinity of paper, plastic, and on body bags. A quiet, despairing laugh bubbled up in my throat as the gruesome truth dawned on me. Rob wasn't just missing. Rob had been bagged. I stood there, trembling, my mind barely able to process the nightmare unfolding in front of me. Mr. Jaspin, however, was unfazed. He walked among the corpses, pinching a cheek here, lifting an arm there, muttering tut-tut or nodding in approval as though he were inspecting fine fabric instead of human remains. He eventually stopped in front of the body Benny had mentioned, the belligerent customer from earlier in the night. His face was bruised, caved in where the security guard had struck him, and his skin had taken on a deathly pallor. His eyes, even in death, seemed to leer with a strange intensity. My, Mr. Jaspin said, admiring the body. He's quite a big fellow, a lot of material to work with. His skin's a little dry in places, a touch of eczema, but that's manageable. Benny, old chum, you've done well. I'll take him. Mr. Shi will be pleased. Benny exhaled in relief and quickly led me out of the basement. I could hardly keep my thoughts straight. That man had been purchased. His body, treated like fabric for a suit. How many others had suffered this fate? How many more would? As we walked back toward the store, Mr. Jaspin caught up with me. He slipped a business card into my hand. As for you, my fine fellow, we could use a talented worker like you at our establishment. Shah runs a tight ship here, but we're a bit more free-spirited at the tailors. Do think about it. Take care. With a wink and a jaunty step, he left, dragging his horrific purchase behind him. I stood there, numb, clutching the card in my hand. I had never felt so close to the edge of madness. Whatever this place was, whatever it truly did, it was worse than I had ever imagined. I had to get out, but I wasn't free yet. I still had to make it through the night, and a few more shifts until I had the money for Danny's treatment. If I could survive just a little longer, I could quit this nightmare and never look back. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I was ushered back upstairs, my mind foggy with everything I had just seen. Benny was talking to someone, but I barely registered it until I caught sight of a new face. A man, older, with sharp, unblinking eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. His gaze was relentless, and when he spoke, his voice was firm, yet eerily calming. I know you're likely unsettled by what you've witnessed, he began. But she knew. The death you've seen is as much a part of life as anything else. What you saw is what we offer here. It's what we sell, in all its forms, and it's even in our name. His words sent a chill down my spine. He continued, I hope you understand this and don't act impulsively over the next few days. We value your work, but some people lack the fortitude to handle the reality of what our business entails. Just remember that when you return to your house on 4th Avenue, the cherry tree at the end of the street is in bloom. It's beautiful. Perhaps you and your daughter should enjoy it while it lasts. He placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it in a way that felt more like a warning than comfort. With that, he turned and walked away. The threat was clear. My mind raced, reeling from the gravity of what I had witnessed and the quiet menace in the man's words. I was in deep trouble, no question about it. I had no idea how I was going to get out of this, but one thing was crystal clear. I couldn't stay. As I left the store in a daze, something Mr. Shi had said lingered in my mind. She knew. The way he had spoken about it so naturally, as if it was woven into the very fabric of the store's identity. And then it hit me. The name. Shi's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. It seemed innocuous at first, but the more I thought about it, the more ominous it became. I pulled out my phone and looked up the meaning of the kanji by the store's name. The kanji was shi. In Japanese, it could mean the number 4, but more often it was associated with something far darker. Death. The horrific simplicity of it all crashed over me. I had spent nearly a month working at Death's Nighttime Convenience and Grocery. I didn't go back. I couldn't. I quit that night. I didn't care about the money anymore. My family's safety had to come first. I would find another way to pay for Danny's treatment, but there was no way we could stay here. Not with Mr. Death knowing exactly where we lived. I had to get us out before it was too late.